Hey everyone, welcome back to the 443 Security Simplified. I'm your host, Mark the Liberty, and joining me today is...
Corey Island-bound Knockreiner. Soon to be, anyways.
Only partially checked out Knockreiner. On today's episode, before Corey heads off to vacation, we're going to cover a Chrome extension hijack that ran rampant in the end of 2024, the latest activity from Salt Typhoon, the China state-sponsored hacking organization, and then some cool research into India's McDonald's McDelivery service and how you could potentially get free or very cheap French fries out of them.
I'm waiting for the McRib. They brought it back. Maybe not in India, but certainly here.
With that, let's go ahead and McDeliver our way in. So, Corey, I guess first off, welcome back.
Yeah, Happy New Year, my friend.
I feel like we haven't done a podcast in a month because I think we haven't done a podcast in a month. So.
It may have been that long. I don't know, 3 weeks, something like that. It was a nice time off. Granted, I'm about to go for more time off. That's what happens when you don't use any of your time off fast enough.
I am, unlike you, or I guess, unlike you, not able to get that respite and instead just back into the world of cybersecurity head first. And we missed a lot of interesting stuff over the couple weeks while we were out.
I bet I saw a few stories I shared with our little internal chat.
Yep. But I guess I've got a couple that I thought were pretty interesting from relatively recent times over the holidays. And the first one I think we should start with is there were a few news posts I saw pop up over New Year's, like around that time frame, about roughly 3 dozen hijacked Google Chrome extensions, including one by a cybersecurity firm called Cyberhaven. That's actually the first story I saw. Yeah, was a cybersecurity Chrome extension has been hijacked, which was like the big alarm bell. If you're not familiar with Cyberhaven, they're, I guess, a startup in the DLP space, like data loss prevention. They've got a Chrome extension that blocks users from entering sensitive corporate information into unauthorized programs. And originally, researchers identified their extension had been hijacked to steal users' Facebook data. And after researching, they actually found around 3 dozen different extensions had been impacted over the course of 2024. So this incident, it actually all starts with a phish that was sent directly to the developers for that Chrome extension through their support email. If you've got a extension on the Google, whatever the heck it's called, extension store, Chrome web store, I think that's what it is. I'm a Firefox guy. I don't know these things. If you've got an extension on there, you have to register like a support email on where to send issues to. And some unknown adversary sent a phish to that email, pretending to be from Google themselves that Chrome extension had like broken some privacy rules or some privacy policy within the Chrome web store. They had a few different domains they were using for this phishing hook. There was a supportchromestore.com, forextensions.com, and chromeforextension.com, all, somewhat related, but I think to people that are actually focusing and paying attention, you would probably be like, that's probably not a legitimate domain. But, I mean, the actual phishing message looked pretty dang legitimate. It looked like a violation notice from Google, and at the very bottom, it had a link that said go to policy to go theoretically review the policy that you had broken and prevent your extension from being removed from the store. When you click that link, though, it takes you to a page that ultimately redirects you to a legitimate Google authentication form for a malicious OAuth application. So OAuth, it's designed to grant third-party applications specific permissions on your account. It's commonly used to say like grant read permissions to your profile or your email so that you can sign into one app using your Microsoft account or Google account or Facebook account or whatever. But in this case, the malicious application was requesting permissions to see, edit, and update or publish Chrome Web Store extensions, themes, apps, and licenses that the account has access to. So a lot of stuff, actually.
And if you knew what you were doing, you should see this and hopefully Like, I mean, this all looked legitimate if you're falling for the spear phishing, but anytime it asks for that much privilege, this is where you should pause and put your thinking hat on, right, Mark? By the way, is
Yeah.
OAuth kind of another way? Uh, I guess you can probably use OAuth for transfer, like for federated user login too, but I feel like it's more service. It's like a service account. It's the way it allow other applications to access things as you. Is this kind of another way to bypass MFA in that even if your own user has a MFA attached to it or a 2FA attached to it, you still can give applications OAuth access that may even have all of your privileges?
That is correct. It gives the application itself certain permissions. And it's you basically saying, this application, I trust it enough that it should be able to do X, Y, and Z with my account. So in this case, really privileged stuff, including publishing actual extensions in the Chrome extension store. And like you mentioned, like that's actually a good thing to chat about for a second. Like OAuth, it assumes that the user understands what the heck they're doing. And it assumes that like the permissions that you're granting are like intelligible and kind of obvious of like how risky they are. In this case, like, yes, if you were paying close attention, you would see that it is requesting permissions to manage your Chrome extensions, which is pretty sketchy. But if you've already fallen for the fish, you've already fallen for the hook that you're in violation of something with Google's privacy policies or their rules, and now you're visiting a Google application, logging into google.com, and it says, oh, it's going to have permissions to see your extensions. That makes sense, I guess. And I could see how even if you looked at those permissions, you might still fall for it. But
hey, if you thought it was an email from Google, you think you're giving something Google needs you to give permissions to in a way. I mean,
yeah,
you should have done more validation that it really was from Google, but.
Correct. In OAuth, it's a standard. Like it's something that any application can use to request or grant permissions from any other application or account. But if I had one feature request for the OAuth standard, I feel like that they should have like a way to label, I don't know, risky or elevated permissions to really make them stand out in that window. Like when you go to grant an application permissions, it just tells you everything in there as like a comma separated list. I feel like it should be like if there is like read access to or write access to your account or anything that is elevated, it should be
exactly like it's probably very regular to give some app see access to your post because maybe the app needs to see everything you're doing on Google in order to give you its functionality. But being able to add and edit extensions and to really edit anything about your user account profile, that's a more risky thing that the average everyday app shouldn't ask for. So I absolutely agree, Mark, that maybe for the read versus write versus full account level rights should have different levels of warning.
Because I'm just trying to think of like you and I were cybersecurity professionals. People listening to this podcast are probably IT professionals of some sort, probably also cybersecurity. We all understand like how permissions work in general and could probably spot risky permissions in a list like that. But I'm thinking like if my mom got one of those, not to throw her under the bus, but she's probably not even going to read the dang thing.
Or your dad or your like cousin or any non-IT person. Yeah, absolutely
so
agree.
They're kind of like how Microsoft has done a lot of work to make sure users can't shoot themselves in the foot with macros or like active content in Office documents with like big prominent banners saying this is a security issue. Maybe we need something in OAuth grants where a application can flag permissions that are risky in some sort of prominent banner. I don't know. Who do I know? I'm not a developer of that sort. But either way, so at Cyberhaven and several other extension managers or administrators, they fell for the fish. They granted the OAuth permissions, and the threat actor immediately started taking action. So they went in and they updated Cyberhaven's app to insert a couple of malicious JavaScript files that were designed to steal data from Facebook accounts. It would take things like your Facebook ID, your access tokens, so your ability to log into it, different account info from both your personal accounts and your business accounts too. It even had mechanisms to monitor for like QR code images to intercept basically two-factor authentication with Facebook.
Nasty.
Exactly. And so they inserted all this and then published the update into the Chrome Web Store. And presumably anyone that had auto updates enabled for their extensions then downloaded this malicious one instead. Cyberhaven, they detected this incident around midnight on Christmas. I feel bad for whatever engineer was on call that night. And they were really quick
smart about them holidays.
Yes, they were really quick to take down the malicious updates and put out a statement to their customers directly and online as well too. But we've had a few a few predictions around like attackers and supply chain attacks and things like that. I think this is another example of where like attackers are clearly going after the supply chain. This is technically, I mean, maybe not.
Absolutely,
it technically is a supply chain compromise.
I think it really is a supply chain. I don't think you even have to caveat it. I mean, we all use extensions, and if a legitimate extension you're using gets infected and infects you, absolute digital supply chain or software supply chain attack, in my opinion.
And my initial like hot take when I just saw the title of this article and like the first sentence of it was, why the heck weren't they using multi-factor authentication on their developer account? But to your point earlier, they probably were, and that would literally do nothing to prevent this.
Yeah. You were already logged in, and thus you were kicking yourself in the foot but when you accepted the OAuth permissions after logging in with your own MFA.
Yep. So I think like the main takeaway from this is if you are using OAuth, which is generally like if you see a button saying sign in as blah, 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 that's using the OAuth protocol. If you're using like, if you see one of those extension pop-up windows or the grant pop-up windows, it's OAuth. Be very mindful of the permissions that you are granting it. And if you don't understand exactly what permissions you're giving that application, stop and do a little research before continuing.
And frankly, even if you're a security person, stop and do some research. Like I will throw myself under the bus to say it was one of my own or our own tests. But recently I fell for our own test spear phishing, which happened to get me with a Teams process in something I just happened to be really doing something where the email made sense. It looked like a Teams proper email, and I didn't hover over the link, and pow, I was got by my own spear phishing test as a 20 plus year. Now, the second it went to something, I never would have continued. But, we just mentioned how almost every, technician, let alone security person, will know a little more about permissions in OAuth. But let's not beat under the bush. We all sometimes go too fast. And if there's an email that happens to meet our expectations for something we are doing, and you're an extension developer, you do get regular emails from Google on different things that have to do with you. Don't speed through that crap. Take your time and make sure it really is what it says it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, maybe Chrome extensions are a good frontier for attackers to go after. This clearly
kind of sucks because I like extensions. They're so great, but they are so free. And we didn't even, I'm sure you heard about, this is not cybersecurity related, but the whole honey fiasco, the crappy, even if it's not maliciously illegitimate, extensions have a lot of power, y'all. Be careful with them.
Yep. So speaking of a lot of power and moving on, last year we talked about Salt Typhoon, which, Corey, quick question, Typhoon, what does that mean? Yes.
China.
The Chinese state-sponsored hacking organization, and how they breached several U.S. telecom organizations. They reached the wiretap systems in a couple of them. Their aim was to identify Chinese targets of surveillance, as well as spy on U.S. individuals. During that event, they had access to text messages, voicemails, and phone calls of targeted individuals. Well, last week, the U.S. Treasury disclosed that Salt Typhoon had also compromised the Office of Foreign Assets Control within the U.S. Treasury Department. This is the department responsible for administrating and enforcing our trade and economic sanctions. And it was likely to collect information on...
Why would China care about sanctions? I wonder.
They presume it's to find potential targets, either individuals or organizations in China that might become sanctioned sometime in the future. A few details came out over just the last couple of days. They gained access by exploiting a vulnerability in the the Treasury Department's Beyond Trust remote support platform. It's CVE 2024 12356, which is a unauthenticated command injection vulnerability in Beyond Trust's privileged remote access and remote support products. This vulnerability was originally identified on December 2nd when Beyond Trust was doing a investigation into a security incident involving a few of their remote support customers. They patched it pretty quickly, but seems like the Department of Treasury did not patch it themselves quite as quickly, which is interesting because CISA actually published this as one of their exploited vulnerabilities in like mid-December, which if I remember right, that gives government organizations like 72 hours to patch it, or they get, actually don't even know what the enforcement is, like a slap on the wrist
This
from
irritates
CISA.
me every time governments, the same government regulating. Like I'm not against regulation. I think you and me agree that with security, sometimes companies can be negligent. So it doesn't. You should have a bare minimum sometimes for at least very protected critical infrastructure and organizations. But when the government doesn't pass their own tests, I mean, come on. If you're going to set the rules, you need to at least follow the rules.
Now,
Sorry, off my
it could
soapbox.
be correct. I agree. But it could be maybe the incident actually happened in early December, and that's what caused CISA to add it to the list of known exploited vulnerabilities. And it wasn't until the end of December when Treasury Department reported it. That's possible. But
I have trust in CISA. I have a feeling the Treasury Department, I don't think every government institute follows them as closely as even some private organizations do. But this is me sharing my unvalidated personal bias.
yep. But this is yet another example of attackers targeting remote access tools that are exposed to the internet in order to breach a company. Like we've talked time and time again about them going after VPNs as a popular point of entry. Now they're going after a remote access management platform that is presumably designed to give like secure
RMNs,
access,
essentially.
effectively ZTNA into the organization. But now it's being used by the attackers as a foothold.
MFA,
And
y'all. Although I guess that doesn't help with some of these web application issues.
nope. The second talking point, and Corey, this is more of a philosophical one for you. How much is the United States going to let China get away with? Like, I know we may be
Honestly, I'm
powerless to
sure
stop
we're
them from
doing
hacking, but
stuff. Yeah, I think we're doing stuff too. The truth is, they can get away as much as they like until some international body decides to declare some sort of cyber security peace treaty. I think it's been at least 5, if not 6 years ago, but we at one point made a like there is it UN or is it I think it's UN. The United Nations has rules of physical kinetic wars and things you can't, what happens before a war is declared, and even what you should and shouldn't do during wars. And I think we need something about that for cyber attacks. It's clear we've gone well beyond the point where nation states, or I'm sorry, nation states is the wrong word, state sponsored entities are doing these attacks. And while you can couch them in espionage, I think that the UN needs to come up and make the rules. The problem is China and Russia are also part of the UN, and they actually say you need rules too, but their rules include we have the ability to censor our entire internet and not let anything into our citizens. So I think it's the UN needs to come up with some rules that pass. It's really hard when your adversaries are big parts of that and apparently must have enough voting body to make a difference. But also, are we really letting them get away, Mark? I would like to think that a non-authoritarian democratic government is a little more selective with their espionage, where they're not. Sorry about that. They're not targeting any sort of, private citizens or civilian organizations. But I have no doubt that the Five Eyes and other Western countries are probably doing their share of cyber espionage too.
yeah, because it feels like from the outside, China's eating our lunch lately with all these attacks against like actual federal government organizations that have a meaningful impact and attacks against our telcos that have a meaningful impact. It would be, I know we can't like go to China and arrest the people that did it. That's not going to happen. But it'd be nice to have like some sort of recourse taken against them because it's getting pretty annoying.
The extreme is cutting them out of our networks, right? I mean, they can certainly not allow their citizens to get to the rest of the world, but routing changes in places of the world, allies control, you could cut them out of networks. But I don't know if that's a good thing because you and I have talked all the time that Chinese and Russian citizens are good people and normal people. We may not personally disagree with their government. I don't know if their citizens do or don't, but we may. That doesn't mean we should, remove access to all the citizens. So it's a hard question. And I think the US, I think what they've been doing is things like sanctions. And ironically, China then spies on our sanctions to try to figure out what's coming next. So I think the technical means that we have really would be cut off a lot of innocent people who are already being cut off by their own government versus just hardening ourselves and focusing on defense and making it public every time a bad actor and authoritarian Chinese people that are doing this are bad actors so that the world judges them.
I think that's fair. And I think that is what the US government is focusing a lot on, and international governments too, to be clear, is hardening defenses. Like the EU has the Cyber Resiliency Act coming into full force in 2027 now, which mandates a whole bunch of requirements around products that are installed in networks and how security is maintained on them in order to even be sold in the EU. So I think there are some steps folks are taking, but it would be nice to go a month without yet another state-sponsored compromise of a major government organization.
I wonder one day if we'll actually have an internet that's not a global network, but a network with borders. I mean, if you follow dystopian timelines, hopefully society won't follow dystopian timelines. I could see it as being an issue, but it sucks because it means less for the actual people. I mean, I don't judge any of the people wherever they are in the world, and I think we all deserve human rights and connection to each other. But I can see us slowly building a point where perhaps we just cut off networks that are adversaries, and that would actually be a sad world, in my opinion, to live in.
Yep.
But China's already tried to do that to their own people, as well as a number of other governments.
Didn't Russia recently test their kill switch on the internet too? I think I saw that over the holiday break as well, where they did test disconnecting themselves from the rest of the world. So you're right. It does seem like we're getting close.
To be fair, we're starting to think about our own kill switch. By we, I mean the US. And that scares me a little too, because I would like to see, democracies be the beacon of hope and allyship and connection. And yet I think purely out of dangerous, planning for worst case, we're looking at how to cut ourselves off, which is kind of sad.
Not ideal. Well, moving on from the sad stuff to Happy Meal stuff, there was a fun blog post I
read.
Exactly. Right after a break started, when I was still reading cybersecurity news, there was a fun research article by a researcher named Eaton Zveare on McDonald's India's delivery application called McDelivery. So if you aren't from South or West India, where this specific application is being used, McDelivery, it's a website and mobile app that lets people order McDonald's for, as you might guess, delivery, dine-in, or takeaway. The site and app, they're built using Angular, which is a really popular single-page application framework for developing both mobile apps and websites, which made it a pretty easy target for Eaton to go after. And he found some pretty dang interesting stuff in here. So this all starts when they were looking at order numbers, or when they were looking at the routes within the application, which if you're not familiar with Angular or other single page applications, there's basically a manifest of everything in the app that you can access because it needs to know whether this is local content or it needs to make an API request to handle it. So they were able to quickly see basically what was going on under the hood in this application. They found a few things. So first they went after orders and just quickly found that order numbers are sequential and they could view the information associated with any order that had ever been placed within the application. They call this, it's a broken object level authorization, or BOLA vulnerability. Basically, the API doesn't verify that the person requesting information about an order actually owns that order. Interestingly, the API requires authentication, but the JSON web token that it uses comes from a guest login API that happens in the background when you first visit the website. So you don't actually have to log in to interact with any of this. You get the token for free the first time you hop on the application as a guest. They found several other BOLA, broken object level authorization vulnerabilities, as well as some insecure direct object reference issues in the order review system. Basically, they found they could go in and submit reviews for other people's orders, even resubmit a review for an order that had already had a review completed. They found there was a driver tracker API. It's how it builds the map so you can see where the delivery driver is on their way to your house. They found that for any arbitrary order that is still in progress, they could view the map for that. They also found that the API for that returned a heck of a lot more information than it really needed to. So not only did it return the coordinates of the driver, but also their name, their phone number, their email, and their license plate, which I feel like the person ordering McDonald's probably doesn't need.
Go gig economy. Info. It's totally safe and you'll make a lot of money until it's stolen from you, as well as all your docs.
They basically said if they wanted to, they could write a script to go through all orders and basically scrape all of the delivery drivers' information out of the API. Now, in order to create a McDelivery account, you need a Indian phone number in order to retrieve a verification code to create the account and to log in. But they found there was a hidden API to create a user using a username and password, which they were able to access and make themselves an account. They hit another wall, though, where to log in, you still need that verification code sent to an India phone number, until they found a hidden auth with password page, which let them use their account they created to log in and start making orders. And here in their research post, they went through the deconstructing how an order actually works in here. Basically, when you go to add, let's say, some hash browns to your cart, it creates a cart object, like an actual JSON formatted object in there, generates a unique UUID for that order. It adds in whatever you're putting in there, like your hash browns, your French fries, whatever, under a cart items field, and then it updates the cart. When you go to check out your order, it first sends a post request with the cart ID back to the website. And that site actually creates a cryptographically signed order details response that includes your order number, the dollar amount cost for the order, the items that are in it, that sort of stuff, so that your web browser can send that cryptographically signed response to the payment card processor, which was what the heck, JustPay, JUSPay. Yep. So because it was cryptographically signed, they couldn't just go in there and edit it and change the dollar amount to $1 in that signed order, because it would break the signature. But what they found was, when you're adding stuff to the cart, like adding more French fries or more cheeseburgers, it's just a post request that updates that cart object, that JSON file in there.
A put request, although slightly different.
Yep. And so they thought, okay, if it's just a put request, what if I make a put request to set the gross price field, which is the order total field in the cart object, to $1? And it worked. So they found that they could add a bunch of stuff to their cart, send a put request to say, this actually only costs $1 in total for everything. And the site would say, okay, cool, your cart total is now $1. Now they had hoped, for the sake of McDelivery, that when they go to actually check out, it would recalculate the total before creating that cryptographically signed order details thing. It doesn't. It just accepts whatever's in there. So they were able to get a valid order for $1, send it over to the payment processor, pay for it, and they had a valid order. Now, they didn't want to commit financial fraud, so they immediately canceled it, which is good for the researcher. Once you verified the vulnerability, don't actually break the law. But they did at least confirm now they could order whatever the heck they want for free, but they weren't done at that point.
Almost free. You can't quite do $0.
Almost free, $1. So they weren't done, though. They also wanted to see, could I hijack someone else's order? So it turns out there's this window when an order is pending before they actually complete the payment. where you can still make modifications to the order, even though that cryptographically signed order details thing's been generated and presumably the user is entering their credit card information or whatever. So they found that while it's in that pending state, they could send a request to update the user's address, just any arbitrary user's address, because again, this was another insecure direct object reference vulnerability. So they could change the address to their home address. The user doesn't know this is going on, completes their order, and now instead of it being delivered to them, it would be delivered to the attacker in this case. Now that said, the victim, if they were paying attention now, they would see the delivery location is probably something different, which would tip them off. So the researcher found they could also just change the account ID associated with the order when it's in this state to now move it under their account. So basically, as soon as the user confirms payment and finishes it up, the order vanishes out of their account, goes over to the attacker's account, set up to go to their home address, and now they get all the cheeseburgers, and the victim has to deal with support. And I imagine support would say, well, you don't have any orders. Yeah. So all of this is pretty dang impressive, and a pretty impressive string of vulnerabilities they found in the McDelivery website. They did report it through the McDelivery bug bounty program, where they were awarded a massive $240 in bounty payment for this in the form of an Amazon gift card.
That's horrible. I know that we can't always pay the most huge $1 million bounties ourselves, but this seems like getting food for almost free and taking order. It seems like a pretty. It should be at least $1,000 gift card, if not more. Come on.
$240. Yeah. Funny enough, the researcher asked if they could get paid in a McDonald's gift card, but they couldn't make that happen because the researcher was in the US, and due to whatever reasons, they couldn't create a US McDonald's gift card in India. But either way, yeah, super interesting research from Eaton on this one. They did resolve these vulnerabilities. It took them most of 2024 to do so, but they did at least fix them. And you know what? Hats off to him and his $240 Amazon gift card. I hope he doesn't blow it all on one half of a PlayStation or something.
I wonder if he's Indian. Do you know if Eaton's Indian? At least then maybe the 240 goes a little farther in the economy.
They are not Indian because I know they didn't have a phone number to be able to register.
That's a good point. An account. And Eaton doesn't sound very.
But who knows? Maybe they're based out of another country where $240 still goes a long way. And I shouldn't scoff. At least they got something. A lot of organizations don't have a bug bounty program whatsoever. So
yep.
Good for them. Either way, great research from them. I subscribed to or started following them on social media to hopefully see if there's any future research out of them.
It also shows how a lot of little web application vulnerabilities in different places can add up to a pretty big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Like chaining vulnerabilities is very much a thing in order to gain additional access or elevated impact on the application. And hey, if the end result is free or $1 McDonald's, even if I'm not a big fan of McDonald's, the French fries are pretty great. So I would still accept that as well. But cool research, good way to start 2025. And man, Corey, enjoy your additional time off.
Oh, I'll miss our little talks about the crazy cybersecurity world, but I can't say I'll miss it that much.
Bring back some of that nice weather with you. It's frigid here in Texas right now.
I don't have much empathy for you as the person that usually lives in the locale that is way more frigid than you, although I will give you that it's really unusual temperatures for you right now. Have you gotten any? I think Texas will get some snow this year for sure.
Snow planned for Friday. We'll see. Kids are happy. I am not. Either way, stay warm. And yeah, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Hey, everyone. Thanks again for listening. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, you can please rate, review, and subscribe. If you have any questions on today's topics or suggestions for future episode topics, you can reach out to us on Instagram at watchguard_technologies or Blue Sky. I'm at itsmark.me. Corey is at secadept at bluesky.social. And thanks again for listening. You will hear from at least me next week.